Good morning, Amy. How are you doing?
Good morning, Alexis. It is Scorpio season. Let me tell you. How are you doing?
Yes, definitely Scorpio season and feeling the beginnings of the eclipse. We're starting to move into the eclipse season that we have November, December. So we're really going to dive into that and explore what that means, what we are kind of looking at for November.
Game on. That's what it feels like right now to me is game on.
Yeah.
With the eclipses, with Scorpio season, keeping in mind that like there's big stuff that we're maybe not going to touch into. So I'll just kind of drop it in as things to just hold space around. Venus is out of bounds. She's kind of like burn it all down. So really be watching your Venus stuff. I let all my women's circle members know. We are shifting where Venus moves in 100-year star cycle, and she's shifting her star cycle. That's what we're moving into, is her initiating a new 100-year star cycle. And so she is calling on us to align how we spend our time, how we invest our time, and how we invest our money with our values. Like, are we aligned with our values? And so that's just a piece I'm going to drop into everybody's kind of the edge of your awareness, because we're in Scorpio season. We're investigating and getting curious about where we're investing our most important resources, our time. And is it aligned with your values? And I think that the eclipse season is just really what I'm seeing is like a soundboard, and I know nothing about soundboards, just FYI. I know nothing about soundboards other than what I've seen in movies, but I'm seeing like all of the little dials being pushed up and all of the little turny things being turned all the way up. Everything's just up.
Yes.
Up and more up.
Yeah. And if we feel into some of the smaller cycles, like we're closing out the year, right? Like we're closing out 2021. So whenever there's the end of a cycle, there's always this final push to like that final clearing, that final push to like, okay, we're moving forward. Like you can feel that new beginning is so close that you're kind of in that in-between place where it's really clearing out, really getting ready, right? It feels like that movement. And then touching on Venus, since you brought Venus in, if we look at the smaller cycle of Venus, she goes through a 4-phase cycle. So she hit basically one of her last phases at the end of October, meaning she was brightest in the sky. She's preparing for her new cycle, which begins the beginning of January. And so she is closing out a cycle that she began in the summer of 2020. So she's closing out this, right? Even if we feel into the smaller cycle of Venus, she's closing that cycle out. And to top it off, so that was on October 29th, she hit that kind of last phase as she moves into this last phase. So she hit, it's called her greatest elongation to the east. And she was really bright in the sky if you could see her in the evening sky. And so she's moving into that last phase. She also, on November 2nd, was conjunct the galactic center, which is just this point in the sky that we don't really know a lot about, but it's this potent, it's just this potent fixed point in Sagittarius where she is just shining. She is at her brightest in the sky. She is conjunct the galactic center. She is closing out her cycle. And especially for those who have Venus who rules their chart, so Taurus rising and Libra rising might really feel this, but we can all feel it. And of course it can touch on relationships and love, but it's really, like you said, those values and like those desires within ourselves, to really like come forward with it, right? Like come and be honest with yourself about, I really do want this thing, and this is what I want going forward. So yeah,
it's a 20-year cycle. Like we're setting up by aligning ourselves right now with this Venus star point change we're setting up like our next 20 years. What do you want your next 20 years to look like, people? Get in line, like line it up, make sure that you're investing your time in a way that matches your values. If are your values connection, be working on your connections. Are your values communication? Like, this is where you're investing your time. Are your values raising the consciousness of the whole? Are your values environmental work? Like, then really drilling down into that and committing your time and your resources there. It's a powerful, powerful thing to have your actions match up with your words and your intent.
Yes. And this has all been happening while Venus is in Sagittarius. So she's at the end of Sagittarius. She will move out and enter Capricorn on November 5th. But what we've been talking about, she's been in Sagittarius, which is very forward thinking. It's very looking at the future of what you want. And really, like, it's a fire sign too. So there's a passion of like that desire, really wanting it, like that deep heart desire. And she started, when she entered Sagittarius, she entered the South Node. So there was this purification and this clearing of what no longer works, what no longer serves, what maybe we thought we wanted. But as we move forward to actually, when you really tap into that deep desire, it's not aligned, right? And it may have been at one point, but there's just things, people, situations, could be even physical things in your life that just don't fit anymore. And so as she moved through Sagittarius, it's like this forward thinking and touching into that desire, even if it was just a touching into, so that as she moves into Capricorn, which is an earth-based sign, it's more based in bringing things into reality, bringing things into being, we can move forward with that desire that we have. So I love that you brought Venus in, because I think a lot of November is focused on Mars and like this, like, so it's nice to bring Venus in too, because, everything is always there. It's just some things get highlighted. Yeah. And Venus was highlighted towards the end of October, but as we move into November, like remembering that, like holding what you want, holding that vision, holding that, and however that means for you, but just reminding yourself of that daily, so that as we move through November, you don't get lost in the churning of the eclipse season, and you say, okay, no, I understand why I'm going through this. This is a big releasing because my vision is so big.
Exactly. It's beautiful. And like that visionary piece of Sagittarius that Venus has been in, she's moving into Capricorn. Who is the builder? Capricorns build things. I have one. He's constantly building shit. They build things. And so Venus is asking us to build what's in line with our values. And she's giving us until March 6th of 2022 to play with this, because she's going to move in, she's going to retrograde, she's going to hang out with Pluto, she's going to move back direct. She's really going to hunker down in Capricorn to give us the opportunity that all of this eclipse stuff is churning up and releasing. Mars is like, take action, get rid of this, move it out. And Venus is like, and these are what your values are. Embrace them, do something useful with them, do something beautiful and soul aligned with them. Work with this, work with me, people.
Yeah, she does spend an extended amount of time in Capricorn, right? If we feel into, the amount of time it normally, when she's forward moving, like as she moves through a sign, it's around a month or so that she spends in a sign. And because she's going retrograde in December, she's going to spend a lot of time in Capricorn. And she also will hit that second point of her conjunction with Mars in February. Mm-hmm. So she's going to be really busy coming up, starting December, January, February. Venus is going to be very busy. But for now, she's just starting to move into Capricorn. And also the shadow side of that can be, we almost get too stuck in reality and the logical and the like earth-based, this is what I can see. And we forget that visioning, that forward motion, that dreaming, that of the possibilities. that Sagittarius represents. And so as she moves into Capricorn, really like holding that and knowing that all of the doubts and all of the logical reasons why you can't have those things will come up. All those limiting beliefs will for sure come up. But don't worry, because we get a really like long extended period to work with Venus as she goes retrograde, as she spends all this time in Capricorn, so that we can really build and really bring things into reality. Because that's the beauty of Capricorn of it's great to have dreams, but we also have to take action and move and listen to those intuitive hits and actually bring things into reality. Because that's the whole point. If you have a dream, it's because that is possible. And because that dream wants you to have it, right?
Yeah. So, it's a mutual longing.
Yes. Yes. If you want something, there is a reason for it. So yeah, so let's move into
and to remember, and this, I think this is maybe our Mars segue. The origin of desire is of the stars. So when we're in line with our deepest, truest desire that comes of the stars, that come as part of our soul purpose, as our soul contract, we are moving in alignment, because what we want wants us. When it's in alignment, if we want what's in alignment, it wants us back. And Mars, traditional astrology, see, here we're going to go with Mars. Mars in traditional astrology ruled Scorpio because he was the passionate lover. He was about desire. You know, Mars and Aries, yeah, we're warriors. We are absolutely like put our heads down and get it done warriors. Mars and Scorpio, traditionally, that's where he ruled. And this was his passionate, I'm a lover and I'm full of desire, high of the stars desire self. And Mars, he's heating things up now that he's at home.
He's heating things up. So yes, Mars is home in Scorpio. It's one of the signs he rules. He rules Aries and Scorpio. So Aries, you can feel into that fiery warrior energy, that initiating energy, right? But Scorpio is a different kind of energy, but he's still home. It's this depths, and it's it's really looking at all of the pieces, like those deep pieces that you desire, and all the stuff that comes with that, all of the, like, you know, all the limiting beliefs and all of the doubts. And so he's really like hunkering down into, in case you forgot what your deep desire is, like he's going in there like the warrior he is to make that known. And so he is home. Yes, he is home in Scorpio, and he is in that space as we move through this new moon in Scorpio, as we enter the eclipses. So he's really there the whole time, like holding this deep desire piece. So we have a new moon on November 4th. It's actually a super new moon. Yes, it's a super new moon to open into as we move into the eclipses, because the next full moon will be an eclipse. So it's pretty potent. We have a super new moon in Scorpio, which opens this eclipse window. It's also opposing Uranus, who Uranus is the great awakener. He is this radical change energy of truth. He is just this, like, you know, bringing the lightning bolt of truth. And so to have that super new moon as our, right, like new moon for Scorpio season, it's pretty potent. And Medusa, who we did a Patreon podcast actually, so can go and check more out about our Patreon, but Medusa enters Scorpio that same day. So Medusa is this really, she can be, the shadow side of Medusa can be this feeling like you have to like repress and hide all of your desires and put your desires down. But the higher octave of Medusa is this beautiful healing that is possible when we are able to express our desires. So having all of that as we move into this new moon, as we open the window, just kind of like cracking open the door as we walk towards the eclipse, and Mars is in Scorpio as well. It's pretty, yeah, it's pretty potent stuff.
It is potent. I don't think that we mentioned, we are filming this and recording this on November 3rd. So it is the day before this super new moon that we are chatting about. That it moves us one more moon step closer to the eclipses. We are definitely in the eclipse portal. We're in the eclipse portal in Scorpio season. Like Scorpio for me feels like a private eye or an accountant. Like they want the information, they're out seeking it, they're doing the deep dive, they want to understand, how do we sort this out? And my mom's an accountant. How do we make it balanced and fair? How do we make it right? So there's this audit piece. And so it does feel like it's plugging back into auditing how you're spending your time, auditing where you're putting your attention, auditing, like, are you bringing it here and doing the deep dive here? Because as within, so without. Like if we look at like really old alchemical words just left me. Mercury, help me out here. um, we're going through all of this both personally and collectively. There's how all of this hits our personal charts, and there's how all of this hits us collectively. And I'm sure Alexis and I will absolutely be getting into the United States Pluto return, because there is no avoiding it. And the United States Pluto falls in our second house, our house of values, when we look at the Sibley chart. And we're being asked to audit our values right now as a country, as a people, as communities. What are our values? Where are we going to invest ourselves? And this eclipse season prior, like moving into this, just feels to me so juicy. And I love that you keep using the word potential. Potent is the root of potential, and potent is, it's our power. It's our ability to change and to grow and to learn and to stretch into something more. And this is all of this churning, and all of this mess is giving us a chance to really look at, like, whoa, is this how I want to live my life? And do I want to repress my desires? Like, do I want to turn that away? Do I want to allow that separation? Like, I'm feeling that Medusa thread. Go check out our Patreon. That we spend a lot of time repressing our most beautiful parts.
Yeah, and to hold that as we enter this new moon, knowing it's a super new moon, that there's this extra potency of the seeds that we plant, like holding that desire. You don't have to know the how yet, because things will unfold, right? Like we have the full moon, which is an eclipse. We have a whole bunch of stuff that's going to unfold over the month. And you'll know the how. Like once you hold that desire, the how will show itself to you, right? Like the universe just comes and says, oh, you want this? Okay, great. Like I will help you get there. Even if it's just step by step. So you don't have to know the how when you're planting the seeds, but to really hold that of, this is a cycle. It's a new beginning. It's a new moon, right? It's a new cycle, and holding that desire and holding that and planting those seeds, not necessarily knowing the how, because things will unfold. And we'll get more into the eclipses, but basically the eclipses are when a new or a full moon is close to the north and the south node. So we'll dive more into the nodes and as we move through the month, but just keeping that in mind, that the north and the south node are these points of where, not where our little self wants to go, where our higher self knows we can go, is right, that north node. And then the south node is where we've come from, but there's also gifts there. There's gifts that we just have to like like refine them, right? It's like refining gold. Like there's a lot of shadow that can come. There's a lot of stuff that needs to go, that we need to release, because we kind of cling on to things. If we feel to the self node, there's this clinging, this comfort zone. But there's also these beautiful gifts that come when we can refine them and release all the shadowy bits that come with it. So that's just a little on the node. So remembering that as we talk about eclipses, that they are a new or a full moon that is close to the nodes of the moon. And that's what makes it an eclipse. And we had 4 this year. So we had 2 back in the summer, and we'll have 1 again, November, December. So, and we also mentioned that Venus moves into Capricorn. That happens the day after this new moon. So really holding that energy, like while she's in that last degree of Sagittarius, like still holding this visionary torch. We have Mars and Scorpio, like really diving into the depths of your desire, like really holding that on the 4th, on the new moon, because she moves into Capricorn the next day. And she enters into this new place of, okay, and now we're going to make things happen. And not that things are going to happen instantly, but she just moves into that place that, like we mentioned, she's going to be in for many months. So holding that vision, that it's really beautiful that she has that last degree, and the last degrees of a sign are really potent. That last degree of Sagittarius, that she's holding that desire. Mars is there with his deep desire. And we're also opposing Uranus, who is like the truth. Like you really can't escape like what desires are coming up. Like just listen to them, just listen and be like, okay, yeah, yep, this is, I don't know how, there's lots of stuff that's probably going to get kicked up along the way, but on this day, on this new moon, on this super new moon, I am just going to hold that intention and desire for what I want.
So juicy and yummy. The thing that comes up around the how is like hearkening back to just talking to Deb on our most recent podcast. We spoke to a medium, her name is Deb Vera. And one of the things that she reminded us again is that the ancestors, our spirit posse, spirit in general is here to support us. And we just need to ask for help. Like we are the deepest desire of all of our ancestors. And they have so many gifts for us if we simply ask for help. I call my team my spirit posse. So I will do like a spirit posse assemble and ask for help. Y'all watched me ask Mercury for help there when I lost my words. Ask for help. Alexis reminded us in that same podcast that, Megan Waterson says that spirit is ethical. It's not going to help unless we ask. So rather than worrying about the how, like to just re-emphasize what Alexis said, don't worry about the how. Ask for help. This is what I'm desiring. This is what I'm longing for. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but, spirit posse assemble. I need some help here, team. It's okay. Like we don't need to continue with this ridiculous pioneering, I'm an individual and can go it by myself bullshit. We can ask for help. And then I wanted to bring in, I'll drop it in the show notes. Alexis did this beautiful write-up on the North and South nodes on medium.com. And so I will drop that in the show notes for anybody who wants, she created some really beautiful practices that are going to help you move toward your North or South node. Both of us do readings, both of us pull charts. So if you need a chart pulled, contact us. We'll help you out so that you can work with your nodal energy and work towards moving towards that North node pull. So that was that piece. And think about doing some kind of ritual with this new moon, like a releasing. Maybe some water would be wise. This is a Scorpio new moon. Scorpio is a water sign. Scorpio also kind of always strikes me as like water on fire. So maybe have some water.
Very different kind of water.
Bring in some fire.
Yeah, especially with Mars there. Yes, and that North Node article is really, it's perfect time because since the nodes are so highlighted, yeah, you can just look at it and it's specific to your north node in your chart.
Yeah, they were really loud. They're like, talk about Alexis's.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that in. Yes, no, that
I got
is
your back.
a very good resource. And feels to mention the next piece of the day after the new moon as well. Mercury moves into Scorpio, and Mercury is the messenger, the translator. And he's like this little, he's like this golden, he has these golden wings on his ankles, and he moves very fast. He's this messenger, and he can traverse any realm. So when Mercury enters Scorpio, it's like, oh, here is actually those messages that you were asking for around those desires that you planted just yesterday. Yeah, sure. I'm going to come in with my like golden little wings and move through Scorpio again with that holding this like torch of the message that you need to hear, right? And he'll be there for a bit, so it, right, like listening for it as it develops, as we move through. So Mercury will be in Scorpio just the day after that Scorpio new moon, and so that feels supportive for a lot of the messages and a lot of the insights that will be supportive for those seeds that we planted. So yes, we have Mercury entering Scorpio on November 5th.
And knowing that it's going to come in pieces. Like I don't know about you, Alexis. I can speak for me. Very rarely have I gotten the full picture in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of if I'm developing a new offering, if there's healing coming in, very rarely has it shown up all in the same, like, and here it is, sweetheart. It comes in pieces. And so continuing to ask for help, continuing to seek support, and know that you're going to get the pieces you're ready for at the exact right time. It's going to be perfect timing.
Yes. Yeah, that you don't get it all at once. And it's never as you expect it, which is part of the beauty and the fun of life. Like you, right? If we knew it all, it's like going to the end of the book, knowing how it'll end. Like that's right. Like that ruins the whole story.
Yeah.
That there is also a joy we can bring to it. Like, although we are in this Scorpio, which is the depths, right? And we're like, talking about all these deep things, there is joy you can bring with it. And I think of Mercury in that way too. Like he's just this fluttering, very fast. And he's like, yeah, like I'll bring the messages. They can come in many different ways. You never know how they're going to show up, but it doesn't also have to be so serious. Like we can move through these really deep pieces and bring this lightness. Like Mercury to me has a lightness, and yes, he's the trickster and he can like push our buttons, but he also has a lightness that I feel like, especially as he moves through Scorpio, can bring, right? And he can bring the messages and he can bring the insights. And if we're open and curious, right, that is a Mercury kind of a word too, is that curiosity. It'll go a lot smoother than if we're like eye on the prize, like I need to know what this next thing is, and we're just so serious about it. Like you're probably going to miss it if you're in that energy, rather than when you're in this open, curious, like, oh wow, what is the next piece? Like what is this next piece of the puzzle? Like this is exciting. Holding that curiosity also changes it a bit.
Yeah. And sticking with that's interesting. Like if you could make that your little mantra, ooh, that's interesting. That's going to be really helpful and really supportive right now in all of this juicy energy. I was just like, what was coming, Alexis, with the like being curious and being playful was all of the times that I hear from clients or you and I talk and we're like, this happened and this happened and this happened. And how when you're just willing to be open and it doesn't need to like suit our little head stories, how like that's why we always say you can't make it up. You could not possibly script how divinely organized the magic is. You just can't. And Mercury, yeah, he's super playful to me. Um, he zips around and he's everybody's pal. And we can sometimes get caught up in the weight of things and get oh, that was really raw and that was really heavy. And yeah, it was raw and heavy. And wow, was that interesting and beautiful. It's both.
Yes. And remembering that as we move through November, because there are some challenging aspects and some things that will get kicked up for sure. So remembering all of that, right? That there is this lightness and there's the beauty in all of it. Because then we have on November 10th, we have a really big aspect of Mercury, who we've just been talking about, conjunct Mars, who we've also been talking about. So, right, those two in Scorpio, they meet up at 7 degrees of Scorpio, and they square Saturn in Aquarius all that day. So as Mercury and Mars meet up, they square Saturn. So this for sure can bring its challenges. But we love challenges because it brings all the stuff up that just needs to shift and move so that we can get where we want to go, right? So it's like, if you were playing a game and there was no challenge or there was no, right, and you just could go on I'm just picturing like a board game where you just all the way, okay, you go all the way forward and you get to the end and there was no challenge, there was no pushback or that's not, right? That's not fun. We need the challenge to help us grow, to help the process become greater. So that day is, it's a big one. And remembering all of this, that we can also bring that curiosity to it, because if you feel into Mercury and Mars and Scorpio, Mercury, the messenger who is meeting up with the warrior who is fighting for our deepest desires at the moment, they meet up. There's going to be some big messages that come around that time, around that day, right? And they can come in many different ways. It may even come in dreams. It may come in conversations you have, right? It can come in many different ways, but just listening, because most likely it's going to come in a maybe challenging or maybe a way that pushes your buttons, or right, because it's squaring Saturn, who is about bringing things into reality, right? One of his archetypes is the carpenter. He is able to build, and he will help you build what you desire, but it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come without its challenges. Not to say that there can't be ease in how we experience it, but that the challenges that come up help us. They help us grow. They help us think even bigger. So that day, is a biggie. It's a big one, and that comes on November 10th. So it comes kind of in between this new moon and the full moon eclipse. So it's right in that middle area that we have that aspect.
Yeah, it's during this edging in, we're in the waxing period of the moon at that stage. It's interesting because a client just this week asked me Amy, what do you think is going to happen when Saturn and Mars square up again? Because the last time, just to give everyone a reference point, they squared up once earlier this year. It was January 6th. I don't know if anyone remembers that. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I felt into it for a moment. And what I said to the client was, it feels like what's going to happen is we're going to get more information related to January, that there is going to be a deeper level of disclosure, because I hadn't looked at the astrology and I didn't know Mercury was involved in it. And I could feel that there was this information piece that's going to happen. So also, it's not just applying it again to our own personal lives. That's what we have control over, is ourselves. It's also watching how these patterns show up in the world. Astronomy is great. It's the science of the movement of the cosmos. Astrology means the language of the stars. And I was talking to my child and one of his buddies who's super into astronomy right now. And I asked her, I said, are you also studying astrology? And he scoffed at me and poo-pooed me. And both of these little boys have dogs. And I said, well, Would it do any good to be able to see that the dog's tail is moving if you didn't know what it meant? Watching what the things are doing up in the cosmos is useless if you don't know what the language is, if you don't know how it shows up, if you don't know what it's trying to tell you. Yeah, dogs wag their tails and they have like, I'm scared, I'm making myself big, go away wags. And they have the, I'm so happy to see you and I'm going to shake my whole body. If you don't know what the language is, the movement means nothing. So like being able to feel the language, being able to feel into, oh, I'm hearing that you're concerned that this Mars Saturn square is going to bring up more of that energy that was so scary in January. And I'm feeling like, oh, there's a thread of information. Like it's going to be about information this time. It's going to call back. It's going to harken back to that. And it's going to be information about that. Feel into it. It's all there. Everybody can feel it. Let's go do this.
Yeah. And so feeling into that cycle of, we had Mars square Saturn mid-January, then we had Mars opposing Saturn in July, the beginning of July. So you can also feel into that evolution. Mm-hmm. And then coming into this Mars Saturn square again, November 10th, right? There's that evolution from January through the summer. And now, right, there's this kind of information piece, and this piece that we couldn't have seen before. We couldn't have seen back in January, or even as things started to progress in July. We still couldn't see the pieces that we needed to see, mm-hmm. that we can now see. And so that is there. Yeah. And also, as we feel into Uranus, who we mentioned was opposing the new moon. Uranus is also really loud because the next week, Mars opposes Uranus. And this is a pretty big aspect as well, because we have Mars in Scorpio, Uranus in Taurus. And also, as we're talking about the nodes and these eclipses, the nodes will begin to shift into Scorpio and Taurus. They are in Gemini and Sagittarius right now, with the North Node in Gemini and the South Node in Sagittarius. And the nodes move backwards. So they will be moving into Taurus and Sagittarius come January. So they're getting ready to shift. And so we have this Mars opposing Uranus in Scorpio Taurus, where this is going to happen, or the shift is going to happen. And it's big ignition. Like Mars brings ignition, and Uranus does as well, just in a different way. He brings like this high vibratory kind of electric ignition, and Mars brings a very fiery warrior-like ignition. And so to have those two opposing each other, and also this first eclipse we have, the third of the year, but this first for this season is going to be in Taurus. So different sides of Taurus and Scorpio, but you can just feel that we're moving into some really potent territory. And also feeling into the fact that Mars squared, so there was, if we feel into the cycle, right, of we were talking about how Mars and Saturn had their January, July, November cycle. If we feel into Mars and Uranus, they met up back in January 20th. Mars was in Taurus with, because right, he moves faster. So he was in Taurus with Uranus. They had a conjunction back in January. So it was around that same time, right? So yeah, these two, Saturn and Uranus, are kind of talking to us, and Mars, those three are kind of talking to us here, saying like, okay, there's some stuff that it's not just right in this moment, it's stuff that was happening in January that is just coming full cycle. And so that happened in January. We had Mars conjunct Uranus. They squared off in July. So again, it's like within days between the Mars Saturn aspect I talked about was July 1st. This happened July 3rd. We had Mars square Uranus, and then Mars opposing Uranus on November 10th. So they're the timing of it, January, July, November, between Mars and Uranus and Mars and Saturn, right? Like you can't make it up, that there is definitely something going on that you can't deny, that there is this cycle that we are coming to this point in November where there's some big ignition, there's some big information, there's big, and we say big, but it can just come in like this insight of like, oh wow, like I just know this in a whole different way. Like I knew it intellectually, but I know it in my body, right? Like it can come as that kind of big. It can also come in like things happening in your life big, but when we say big, like that can sometimes be the biggest thing of when you just have this like knowing that you knew something, right? When we say knowing, like we knew it intellectually, but there's this deeper knowing, like gnosis. And yeah, so that is, as we are moving through November, like just feel into all this, that these are bigger cycles, that it's not like this is the first time we're having, you know, any type, like these guys have been working at it. They've been aspecting and meeting in the sky all year.
I want to bring in, since I'm apparently on a collective kick, I go on my little kicks, I go on my little tangents. Alexis thankfully keeps us on track, and I tangent all over the place. With Uranus and Taurus, we're seeing a lot of massive Earth events. And there feels like there is real power in the fact that we've got all these major global climate summits and meetings happening right now. Like the UN is meeting, the like I've just been, you know, scanning headlines and watching the fact that we've got major climate summits happening globally right now. As Mars is opposing Uranus, who's in Taurus. Uranus and Taurus is major Earth events. You know, Japan just recorded like the deepest earthquake ever recorded. It happened so deep, like 400 plus miles or something insane, into the earth. We've got the United States was just hit by the bomb cyclone, which, reading about it, I was like, it's an atmospheric river. There's so much water in the air that it's actually a river in the sky. We have some crazy Earth events going on. I'm sure everyone has heard of climate crisis, regardless of whether you think it's real or not. That's Uranus and Taurus. And I love that Mars is over there in Scorpio, investigating and bringing up the accounting. And like, it feels like oppositions feel either like this forging to me, this energy pushing in and coming together and creating the diamond, like really high pressure situations. It can also feel like this to me, where the two energies are pulling apart and creating space for us to bring in something new. And this Mars Uranus, I'm digging it. And I love that it is coinciding. Well, we're being asked what our values are. Hello, Venus. What are our values around our home, our planet, and our relationship with it?
Yeah, it's reminded me of a conversation I just had yesterday, like unexpectedly, just had this conversation with somebody who we were talking about climate, and we were talking about all of these pieces and, you know, all of it. But he brought up that a century ago, they started to look into creating electric cars, and they had the technology a century ago, but oil came in and right. So like that never happened. Imagine if a century ago we actually went forward with electric cars, how different the world would be, how much more like the technology around electric cars, right? Like just, and that blew my mind of, wow, yeah, we really, I mean, we really made some mistakes for that century, because look at where we are, right? With like, imagine that if we had for a whole century had electric cars, and that was the primary source, like the technology would be so advanced and it would just be a totally different situation, you know,
I love how sweet and generous and Venus you are. We really screwed up. I'm with my like son, I would be like, we fuck shit up. And you're just sweet and generous and loving. And it's one of the million things I love about you.
And it comes down to money, right? And so we look at all of these things of like, wow, what have we been doing for a century? Like, oh my God. And it was just one of those moments that I was having this conversation, right? Like unexpectedly, just had this conversation. And we started talking about all types of things with, solar power and all of these things. And it's just funny to feel into, yeah, like this is what's being brought up right now. Because we have this new moon is opposing Uranus. Like there's a new way. Like it's possible, right? It's almost like things have to get so loud and so bad for there to be some kind of pushback. And also that Mars opposing Uranus aspect that happens on November 17th is at 12 degrees, which is the degree that the new moon occurred at. So it really brings this piece in too of like this ignition of that. And it can be a personal, right? It can be those personal desires. And then it can be that collective global, like, what do we want for this planet? Right. Feeling. And so you can feel that as we're talking about the things that are happening globally, conversations that are coming up, like it's loud, it's there. Yeah. And then we have an eclipse in Taurus. So I'm also very interested because the next eclipses that we move into, we're moving out of the Gemini Sagittarius eclipses. We're moving towards the Taurus Scorpio eclipses. So like I said, the nodes will move into Taurus and Scorpio in January. And so we have this Taurus eclipse, which is right, all this that we've been talking about of the earth and Uranus and Taurus of like this revolutionary, like what needs to change? What do we need to see? And so that eclipse is a partial lunar eclipse at 27 degrees of Taurus, and it's making a trine to Pluto.
Can't make it up.
Can't make it up. Who is he is the transformation king. Like he is the one who is like evolution, transformation. That's his jam. Like that is his thing, right? And so to have this eclipse in Taurus after all of this has happened, so after we have all the activations with Mars and Saturn and Uranus, so that happens actually 2 days after that Mars opposing Uranus aspect. That was the 17th. Then the 19th is when we have the eclipse, right? So it's all like, right, we talk about how there's always that buffer. It's all happening, right, at that time. And that day, Venus makes a trine to Uranus. So they're both in earth signs at this point. So Venus in Capricorn makes a trine to Uranus in Taurus. And that is this, right, this values, like all the stuff we're talking about. Yes.
Can't make it up.
Can't make it up.
This full moon eclipse that's happening on the 19th, it's so interesting to me because it's a cross sign eclipse. The nodes are in Sagittarius and Gemini. Meanwhile, the moon and the sun are in Scorpio and Taurus. And so for me, what I'm feeling most loudly is how all four elements are involved in this eclipse. Like normally our eclipses are in two elements. Sagittarius and Gemini are air and fire. And we've had air fire eclipses for the past 2 years because that's where the nodes have been for the past 2 years. And now with this cross sign eclipse, we're bringing in Taurus, which is earth, and Scorpio, which is water. So all four of the elements. So there's for me, this eclipse really has a feeling of like bringing it all together. There's a wholeness because when we are embodying all of the elements as we are made of the elements, that's when we're most in our center. It's when we're most in a place of spirit. So there is a really high spiritual calling with this eclipse for me because of this. The four elements are coming together. We've got, our awakener in Taurus. We've got our transformation coming from Pluto. We've got Venus over there being like, what are your values? Who do you want to be, people? Like the rest of the universe is laughing at us. And, maybe the best thing that could happen is that we get invaded by aliens. And I don't think that the aliens are going to waste their time with us, because we are so low tech in the most important ways possible. Because being high tech is having the ability to recognize that we are all humans and we're all sharing this space, and that the animals matter and the plants matter, and that life, capital L, life matters. The aliens aren't going to waste their time with us. They're looking at us and they're like, they're all going to kill themselves off by 2027. So we can just come and, settle after they're done with themselves. This eclipse feels just potent to me. This coming together of the four elements with our transformation and our values and our awakener. And where is our center? Where is our spiritual center? And we need to stop farming it out. We need to stop farming it out to our religions. We need to start farming it out to public health. We need to stop farming it out to our politicians. We need to bring it home, because this is home in each and every one of your bodies.
And to have that anchor as we move through, because eclipses, my favorite way to describe it is like a churning. It's like this deep churning of everything that needs to come to the surface. Beautiful things come in eclipses. I've had beautiful people come into my lives. I've moved to beautiful places during an eclipse. Like, I haven't planned it, but that's just the way it's happened, where things can come into your life that are beautiful. And there's often a lot that needs to get that's ready to go. So there's this deep churning of a lot that can happen during eclipses, and having that anchor within yourself, knowing that you're good, knowing that all of this stuff can happen, knowing that there can be all of this global kind of chaos, right? Like, where are you in the chaos? Yeah. Because that is the point of all of this, is to find yourself, find your center, and know that we are infinite beings. So no matter what happens, we're okay. We will be okay, right? And also feeling into the nodes as we move into this Taurus Scorpio shift, feeling it's a new chapter. I say, like, when the nodes shift, it's like a new chapter. So they'll shift in January, but we're starting to like end this chapter, kind of seeing the pieces as we begin to start this new chapter. And the nodes are in a sign for about a year and a half. So you can feel that kind of reflect back. And also, if you're familiar with your chart, you can look at what houses are Taurus and Scorpio for you. What planets do you have there? Because that's where we're going to be moving for the next year and a half, is this Taurus Scorpio place, where it's a whole new chapter. So it's a really exciting time. And yes, it can feel overwhelming at times, and it can feel like, oh my God, everything's shifting and I don't know who I am, right? If we're just being really dramatic. But it's beautiful, because we're just entering a new chapter. That's all it is. We're just getting ready to enter a new chapter. We're just closing out the pieces, and our little human likes to flail and tantrum, but it's just the end of a chapter. That's all. And so when you look at it that way, and that's why astrology is helpful too, because you can look at your chart and say, oh, okay, this is what's going on. This is what's hitting me. This is just the message, right? Like, it's just like a map. It's not going to tell you have to do something. It's just information to say, oh, okay, yeah, this is why I'm feeling this way, because this is what I'm moving into. This is what this next chapter, is starting for me.
Yeah.
So.
And on that map thing, a reminder that maps are useful, but they're not real. And what I mean when I say that, it's so interesting. I say that to some of my male clients and they're like, what? Maps are too real. No, they're not. No, the actual territory is real. Landing in the territory is real. And I come at that from somebody who has spent a lot of years studying anatomy and physiology. And we have a lot of maps in that world. We've got muscle maps, and we've got nerve maps, and we've got bone maps, and we've got all kinds of maps. And I'm a person that has been fortunate enough in my education to get to work in cadaver labs and when you actually open up the human body, when you touch the human body as a body worker, things aren't like perfectly separated and ideal. Like just taking the piriformis, it can take, the sciatic nerve bundle can take 3 different routes in regards to the piriformis. So the map is an idea. It's useful, but it's not real. So just hold that this is a tool, and it's a really useful tool. And you still have free will. You still have a choice around how you show up, how you meet the times, how you meet the energy, and who you're choosing to be. Fate is what happens to us. And fate is often the easy route. Destiny, the stuff that comes from the stars, the desire, that's stepping into the unknown. And the eclipses, they're bringing us some unknown, and it's beautiful and it's exciting.
Yeah. And that first, so this eclipse that we're talking about on the 19th is a North Node eclipse. So the North Node is in the very beginning of Gemini, and this eclipse is at the very end of Taurus. So that's why they're still close, but they happen to be in different signs. And it's a North Node eclipse. And it always comes with the unknown. The North Node is always, it pushes us. Mm-hmm. It challenges us. It's always, we don't necessarily, I mean, we do want to go there, but there's a part of us that isn't so sure because it is the unknown. And so feeling into that this is a North Node eclipse, kind of, showing us and showing us what is possible, mm-hmm. and that there will innately be a part of us that just is like, no, thank you. Right. But it's a small part of us, usually the part of us that really wants what it wants, and why it's so important to hold those desires that we were talking about earlier, right? From that new moon and the Sagittarius, like holding that desire is so important, because when you really have that deep burning desire, there's no ignoring it, right? And there can be all the stuff that comes up with it, but at the end of the day, it's worth it because what you want is so deep within you. And so that is a North Node eclipse. So this is all happening during Scorpio season, right? While the sun is in Scorpio, all of this is happening. But on the 21st, November 21st, the sun moves into Sagittarius. So we enter Sagittarius season. So, right, so it brings a different energy. It brings all of the depth and all of the discovery we've had during Scorpio season. We move into fire. We move into that illumination of these visions, the desires, that forward thinking. And sometimes, the shadow side of Sagittarius can be like, we think we know it all. Right? Like I have the desire and like, I know, one of the beautiful things to hold is to say, this is what I desire, but I hold it to be this or something better, right? Or to be even better than I can imagine. Mm-hmm. And so that can be a piece with Sagittarius too, of bringing the openness, bringing the curiosity, because we don't know it all. We just don't like that. I know for sure we do not know it all. And so
like, right, I just think of Lucia.
Yeah.
Like I think of Lucia when you say we don't know it all, reminding us that, you can go back to our podcast with her. She speaks into that there's like 90% of everything is unknown to us. We don't know it all. So stop pretending.
Yeah. Yeah. There aren't many things that I know for sure, but that is one that I know for sure. I remember when I was in school and I was taking neuroanatomy, and the professor was saying, I'm going to teach you everything there is to know about the brain. But honestly, there is so much we don't know. Like we know this much, like this tiny percentage of the brain. And it's a lot. Like you're going to be overwhelmed with all this information. And it is a tiny sliver of what we know. And that's why it's right. Like there's just so much we don't know. So as we move into Sagittarius season, remember that.
Hold all of the space for, I don't know. Yeah. I think it could be this. And right now, this is what I'm going to say, I believe, and it could change tomorrow because I could learn something that shifts it.
And that's beautiful because the dreams we have, like the possibilities are even better than we can imagine. Like how great is that? Right. And so as we move through the end of November, the South Node gets kicked a little bit. So I say kicked, it gets,
I
don't know why I said kicked, but maybe, maybe
we're going to find out at the end of November.
That was an interesting word to just come out. So on November 23rd, the sun conjuncts the south node. So as we mentioned, the south node is at the very beginning of Sagittarius. So as the sun moves in, it joins up with the south node, and it brings this, I mean, they're in fire. The sun is fiery. It brings this like this illumination, but also this purification and just this like big fiery energy. And the south node is right. It's what we talked about. It's what needs to be released. But I also have this really cool image of like refining gold, right? Like this, there's different ways that you can refine gold through acid, and through fire is one of them. That through heat, you can actually refine gold, right? Like, so there can be a lot of just like those icky sticky bits that come with the south node, of just those pieces that we just hold on to, and these beliefs that just, they're not true, but they hold us back. And so there can be a lot of that, but just remembering like this illumination of there's this gold within there. There's these gifts and this just like deeper wisdom that we have within us that is just waiting to be refined. And so that's the image that comes to me when I feel into the sun conjunct the south node.
Love it. So, so good. If anyone wants to come and actually play with fire, I'm doing a full day retreat on December 18th here in Minnesota. So there will be fire involved in this, as well as some just like being in the woods and some shamanic journeying. And yes, like listening to, I just feel so lit up in the best, like, let's have a dance party that just moves us through all of this. I'm excited. And I carry that buffalo energy of let's go into the storm, because going into the storm moves us through it faster.
Yeah. Yeah. And Sagittarius can be a very exciting, and it's ruled by Jupiter, right? There's this abundance, and it can have that exciting party feel, right? So it can be really joyful. And it, right, like, yeah, like that dance party, like perfect. That is definitely Sagittarius. And Mercury also moves into Sagittarius on November 24th. So that day after the sun south node, Mercury moves into Sagittarius. So he's moving fast, right? Remember how he said he's a fast mover? When he's retrograde, he stays in a sign because he's, moving backwards, but he's forward motion. So he was in Scorpio for less than a month, and he now moves into Sagittarius on November 24th. And then he hits the south node, right? Because the south node is at the beginning of Sagittarius. So now Mercury conjuncts the south node the next day on the 25th, right? So he brings those messages, and the sun will be right there too. Like this is all happening very close together. So it's like the sun, Mercury, and the south node, right? It brings this illumination, these messages that we need to hear that may be hard to hear at first, but again, it's like refining the gold, right? You have to go through the fire to get the gold. So that happens.
Pay attention.
Yes.
Like pay attention to the messages you're hearing, especially if they're messages you feel resistant to.
Especially those ones.
Those are the super important ones.
Especially those. Yeah.
If you feel like you want to fight the message or argue with it, take a deep breath and then take 3 more deep breaths. And if you still feel like you want to fight it, keep breathing to allow it to like settle.
Yeah. And the beautiful part is Mercury is at his midpoint of his phase. So he is at this, if you compare it to like the full moon, he is at the full moon phase of his cycle, of Mercury's cycle. And that peaks on November 28th when Mercury and the sun meet up. So there's this, and so this is when you think about Mercury's cycle, he has the inferior conjunction where he is between us and the sun. And then he moves around. So now he's at the far side, he's behind the sun, right? And he's at this full moon phase of his, right, midpoint, the peak of his phase, the illuminations, the insights. So this is really beautiful that we have this insight, this, as it happens in Sagittarius, this midpoint of Mercury's cycle. And so he won't have his next retrograde till January. So, right, we get to be in this, like listening to the messages, listening to the insights that come at this point. And we are in the middle, like all this we're talking about, we're in this really potent eclipse portal. So the messages that come are just, it's like the dial is getting turned up on everything when you're in this eclipse portal. Everything is just a little louder.
It's that soundboard.
Yeah.
All the little dials all the little knobbies being pushed up.
Yeah.
Soundboard. Everything's on high.
Everything's on high. Exactly. And so that comes right before we have, as we move into December, we have the next eclipse, which is a total solar eclipse in Sagittarius. So that's pretty potent. We have a total solar eclipse in Sagittarius at 12 degrees of Sagittarius. It's conjunct Mercury and Vesta. And the last Sagittarius eclipse we've had, right, the series we talk about for the last year and a half, we've had these series. So the series began in the summer of 2020 with that Sagittarius eclipse we had. And so feeling into that cycle as well, but feeling into, this is a south node eclipse, the total solar eclipse. So sometimes, right, there's this, like the sun and the moon come together, right? And there's this moment of darkness, this moment of,
We lose the light.
But it comes back, right, quite quickly, but it's on the south node. And so we have this moment to really clear. And as we move out of this eclipse portal, and as we close out the year, there's this really potent, because at this point we've been through all, like everything that we've been talking about, like we've been through all of it, right? Like November was really big and beautiful. And now we have this last eclipse that is the south node eclipse. Like we're ready for that next chapter, because this is the last of the Gemini Sagittarius eclipses, right? So that's really that closing of the chapter. And there's more pieces that will come as we close out the year, because we also have our third and final Saturn square Uranus aspect at the very end of December. But it really does feel like that closing of a chapter kind of energy.
It's so good. It's like, I understand all of this feels really intense, and it's like a lot of information. And I remember when I first saw an astrology chart, I was like, this is not something I'm ever going to understand or be into. Like, I can't do this. It's too much. It's too much of a rabbit hole. And it's such a powerful tool. And you only have to take in what you're ready to take in. And all of this stuff is happening. And everything moves in cycles. Some of it is cycles that we will only ever see the changing of once in our lifetimes. Some of it we will never see a cycle change in our whole lifetime. And right now, I just want to remind everyone that from my worldview, we all contracted to be here in Earth School right now for these times. We knew this was going to not be like a stroll hip hoppy through the park deal. And we contracted to be here because you have the resilience and you have the capacity to learn and change and grow and help elevate these times. And that's just how I see things.
Yeah. And to remember to bring in that playfulness that we mentioned, to bring in that curiosity, like to do the things you love. Like there's no reason that this can't be full of all of the things that you love. And right. Like this can also be as challenging as it is. I find that when you move into it, like with this awareness, with this, like, I'm going to just witness and see what comes up, just be with it. It becomes a lot less, you can still go through big things and big emotions can come, but it becomes more joyful and it becomes more enjoyable and more exciting, because it can, like, right, adventures are exciting. There can be setbacks, there can be unexpected things that happen, but that's the whole point. That's what makes it exciting. And so to bring that energy, to know that we're in Sagittarius season for, the second half of the eclipse portal, like bring that energy, bring that joyful, bring in all the things you love, like let that be your support. Let the things you love be your support through this period.
And know that you can be on the ground and be feeling it. And when we're present with our feelings, here comes a little science. When we're present with our feelings, the pathway that those chemicals move through in our body, it takes 90 to 120 seconds for the chemical, physical part of our emotional response to move through our body. It's when our head gets involved with all the stories and pulling things from the past or projecting things into the future that we make it take longer. So if you're just present with the right now, I promise you, you can go from broken down and crying on the tile in the bathroom floor to a dance party in like 3 minutes. Promise. Promise, I promise, I promise. Because we do that here. And check out our Patreon. It brings in some pieces with this first eclipse that we didn't touch in here. It's a little juicy. It's a little deeper because we're kind of a little tame in this arena here. Any other pieces, Alexis?
No, I think, we covered a lot. We covered basically the whole month, right? We covered a whole month, and we'll dive more into, other pieces, but that feels like this eclipse piece, it just felt really important to emphasize all the pieces and to just bring in some of that. And again, it's a lot of information, right? Like we touch on a whole month in this short period of time. So knowing that, although sometimes I've listened to podcasts on astrology and I've listened to them at different times in the month, and I've gone back to them and been like, oh, that, and you get a whole different piece. So that's another thing to feel into, that we're covering a whole month. So you might listen to this at the beginning of the month and listen to this at the end of the month, and different pieces will drop in. So knowing that, take what resonates, take what you want to take from it, knowing that we have a whole month to unfold. And just that playfulness feels, and that curiosity just feels like a really important piece to weave into the whole month.
Have a dance party, drink a lot of water, and listen to us a couple times. It's going to help. It's going to provide support. You're going to see things differently. Hindsight's 2020. You're like, oh, that was the day that happened, and look at what happened that day. Look at the messages I got. Look at the magic that came in. Look at what I can do with this. And, share us with your friends. Leave us reviews. Rate us 5 stars. And check out our Patreon.